India Legal, stories that count.
Hello and welcome to this week's edition of India Legal, the nation's first political legal magazine, independently produced by the ENC Group. Usually on this program, we talk about stories that have appeared in India Legal from a legal perspective, whether they are political stories or whether they have to do with social trends. But this week, on special request, we are bringing you our own small mini analysis of perhaps the most important event that has transpired in India, and that is basically the election, the state polls that happened in five states. The most important of which obviously is Uttar Pradesh, which sends the largest contingent, 80 plus people, into parliament and shapes the future of all governance and as well as the government. The major challenger to the BJP, of course, was the Samajwadi Party and its coalition, who bagged a record number of 111 seats. That's for the SP, the Samajwadi Party under Akhilesh, and the Rashtriya Lok Dal, which bagged another 8, not counting a couple more here and there of their allies. Now, this may not be a winning margin, far from it, but it does mark a close to 10 to 11% increase in the vote share, which is something quite massive and something any party can be proud of, especially when running against the might, the power, the money, the strength, the charisma of the BJP, as well as its grassroots organization, the RSS, which is masterful at winning elections. And yet, the BJP actually lost, despite the fact that it gained about 2 to 3% more in terms of its electoral gains, but actually in terms of the seats it captured, it lost close to about between 57 and 60 seats, because some results are still to come in. Let me recap briefly the numbers here in terms of the 7 phases that this election went through. Phase 1, the BJP won 46 seats as against the opposition's 12. This is the area called Jatland, where the Jats were supposed to have voted in large numbers for the opposition, and obviously that doesn't seem to have happened. In phase 2, which is the Muslim heartland of India, the BJP again scored with 28 seats as against 22 for the opposition. In phase 3, which is known as Yadav land, the BJP again outscored its opponents 44 to 15. In phase 4, the number is I think it's 49 to 10. In phase 5, it's 40 to 18. In phase 6, it's 40 to 15. And in phase 7, it's 26 to about the same number for the opposition. You know, there's this huge debate now going on as to what were the factors that led to such a sweeping victory for the BJP. Some of the obvious ones are there for everyone to see: money, power, control, massive control over the media, huge advertising budget, a massive ground organization, perhaps unmatched anywhere in the world, door-to-door campaigning, the invention of catchy slogans, and of course it's welfare schemes, and the like. But what surprises people is what really happened in areas where most independent observers, reporters, including myself, were seeing what seemed like a groundswell of opposition to the BJP rule in UP, based on several factors. These factors were basically bread and butter issues. Unemployment, record unemployment. No matter what BJP spokesmen say, they cannot deny that the economy has been hit very hard since demonetization, the imposition of GST, the whole corona epidemic, the mass migration of workers, the fact that cane prices and have not been paid in time to farmers, virtual food scarcities in different regions, the massive almost a year and a half long farmers' rebellion, which is supposed to have been one of the largest mass revolts of its kind against a sitting government. There was a lot going against the BJP, what you call the anti-incumbency factor. And on the basis of this, and of talking to people at the ground level, at the panchayat level, at the village level, regions, political pundits, experts who've seen repeated elections, it seemed that the BJP was going to be in for a very, very tough fight, if not for huge losses. But that did not happen. Well, several reasons are given about why this didn't happen, but one of the main reasons is that perhaps a lot of journalists were looking at this whole picture on the ground in UP with the wrong lenses. They were seeing this open and sometimes vitriolic and vicious criticism of the Prime Minister personally, as well as the Chief Minister of UP, from ordinary people in the cities as well as in the towns, and this entire so-called Jat rebellion, which found expression in the farmers' revolt, as the surest sign of a wave of anti-incumbency tendencies that would be, a political funeral for the BJP. Now, did these pundits, which one of them includes me, did we get it wrong? And if so, why did we get it wrong? Well, looking back at the last 2 or 3 months, 4 months, it's obvious that the one thing becomes very obvious when I go back and study my notes again and talk to the various observers who were constantly in touch with me, is that this so-called mass upheaval, this mass movement reflected against the BJP. Yes, of course it reflected real anger, and it reflected the issues that we're talking about, unemployment and poverty and the lack of public service jobs, a lot of mismanagement during the corona period, and the shortage of oxygen and mismanagement at different levels, as well as atrocities reported in places like Hathras and Unnao against minorities, as well as the scheduled caste, lower caste populations. These did happen. They were real, and people did take notice of them. But even if these factors were real, and people did take notice, did that translate into an anti-BJP vote, an anti-BJP vote? It did, in the sense that Akhilesh Yadav and his partners have made an absolutely remarkable showing in the fact that they've close to doubled their strength. And that, too, against the might of the invincible, so-called invincible BJP. But they weren't quite able to do it in the way that Mamata Banerjee showed them in West Bengal. There was no repetition of that. And this is because of, I think, the misreading of the psychological mindset of the people who said that they were completely opposed to the BJP and its policies, and that they were really unhappy with their lot and wanted change, that they wanted parivartan. But what did this parivartan mean? Did this parivartan or change mean that they wanted to replace the BJP with another party? Well, here's my take on this. That there were three levels of psychological consciousness in this rather mass opposition to the BJP in UP, which I think the BJP itself recognizes, and so does the RSS. There was a small group that basically just wanted the BJP out and replaced with whoever. I mean, anyone but the BJP. Obviously, this was a small group. There was another group that basically said that we want a certain party in, like we want Akhilesh Yadav, we want the Samaj Party come in and rule the states. So how did this larger group that wanted to teach the BJP a lesson accomplish this? They accomplished this basically by convincing a lot of the observers from the media that we stand united against the misrule of the BJP. But the question that very rarely was asked to these voters, most of whom, by the way, were former BJP voters who held on, but the core base continued, who wanted to repeat their vote for the BJP, but they wanted to make sure that Mr. Modi and the BJP leadership and the RSS was listening. That, look, you have not governed us well, and what we are saying is, we're going to give you another chance. You come back and fix your own mistakes. Please come and see what's gone wrong, and you fix those mistakes. Mr. Modi, we believe in you. We are going to bring you back, but we are not going to bring you back without a warning. And that was the warning message that was coming through during this election. It wasn't a warning that they wanted the BJP, all of them wanted the BJP out and replaced by the Samajwadi Party. But that telling the BJP, mend your ways because we are wise to what is happening in our state. And why is it that they wanted the BJP back? Despite the fact that they would say that, our crops have been destroyed by stray cattle because of the policies of the UP government and the centre, that we have not been paid proper cane prices, a litany of woes that you'd listen. They sounded the same wherever you went, from phase 1 to phase 7. The woes against the BJP were the same. And this is what a lot of people were reading. On the other hand, the BJP started this campaign on its traditional war footing, which is what? Which basically is Hindutva. Now, there's nothing wrong saying that the BJP fought this election on Hindutva, because it started its campaign with Hindutva and it did not give up on its campaign on Hindutva. Remember, Hindutva remained the BJP's core election strategy, and the BJP is proud of it. It isn't as if they hide this. There may be dog whistles every now and then to avoid, punishment or reprimands from the election commission. But at the same time, right from the start of the Western UP campaign in Kairana, where Mr. Amit Shah talked about palayan, which means the migration of farmers out of their villages because they feared Muslim Gundaism. But that the whole law and order platform, that women are safer, had a lot to do with the anti-Romeo squads. It had to do with the love jihad philosophy of the BJP, and it had a lot to do with the fact that a lot of Muslim dons were actually locked up, and among them the named were Mr. Azam Khan and Atf Ali and Mr. Ansari. So the law and order platform had a lot of appeal because subliminally it was also tied into the Hindutva philosophy. The whole 80-20 business that was talked about. the the fact that the bulldozer, actually the bulldozer would be used by Yogi, and he says it quite proudly. He said it during the campaign, he said it after the campaign, and the bulldozer was a machismo kind of thing that really appealed. It appealed to a lot of Hindus, and yes, who always been fed on the theory that there's been a strong appeasement of lawless Muslim elements, some of them tied to terrorists. I mean, this is the BJP point of view. I'm not saying this is true or not. All right, and the reasons they've gotten away with this is because they're used as a vote bank, and BJP is the only party that, by restoring Hindutva pride and refusing to placate Muslim anti-social elements, and by putting them in jail, is basically making the streets safer, not only for men, but especially for women. Well, you add to this the welfare schemes of the BJP. Not many people recognize this. But what Mr. Modi has done actually in UP as part of the electioneering is he has replicated a very successful model that's been used in the South. It was used by Amma in Tamil Nadu, by Jayalalitha, by NTR. It has been used in Orissa. It has been used in Bihar. It's also been used by the Congress under the various Manrega schemes. It was used by Mayawati when she was, it was Mayawati Awas Yojana. She built lots and lots of houses, free houses. So the giving away of freebies and grain and rice and free rations, especially to a population that has been very hard hit by migration because of Corona, was something that does play with the Indian mind, because it's a question of noblesse oblige. It's like, look, हमने इनका नमक खाया है और हम नमक हराम नहीं हो सकते. And then there was a third group within this umbrella grouping of opposition voices, but not opposition, but people opposed to the present regime. They were basically the core voters of the BJP itself, along with the non-Yadav OBCs, as well as the scheduled castes, who wanted change, but that doesn't mean they wanted the change of government. What they wanted to do was to express themselves, perhaps through the media and the other platforms that they could get, and express these views, these views on unemployment and on misgovernance and on autocratic rule, the lack of responsiveness of the bureaucracy, etc., etc. But they did not want a fundamental change. What they wanted to do was basically to teach the BJP a lesson. कि हम BJP को सबक सिखानी है हमने. That doesn't mean they wanted the BJP defeated. They wanted to teach them a lesson. And certainly the polarization, which did take place here in this election, there's no question about the fact that the Jat vote, as many people thought, would consolidate along with that of the Muslims in West UP. If you look at the results that I've just read to you, may have happened in certain places, but it did not happen in the way that we thought that the farmers' movement would make it happen, where there would be complete Jat Muslim unity, and they would vote as a single block, as they did during the days of Chaudhry Charan Singh, and under the coalition first put together by people like Sir Chotu Ram, when this thing became an unassailable, this region became an unassailable Jat bastion, which basically influences some 55 seats, at least 55 seats out of the 104 or 5 seats that are involved in Western Uttar Pradesh. See, the lesson in all this is that the BJP, don't forget, it had been out of power for like decades and decades since its founding, did not give up on the basic principles of Savarkar and Golwalkar and Hedgewar. In fact, they took them forward in their shakhas, and they perpetrated this. They perpetrated this throughout the land. And this was definitely a completely different orientation and outlook than the Nehruvian view of what India should be. And that is one of the reasons that Mr. Modi continues to attack Nehru, because the Nehruvian model across India is basically the model that stands ideologically against the BJP, whether it's Mamata Banerjee, whether it is Nitish Kumar, whether it is leaders in the south, whether it is Patnaik or in Kerala. A lot of the Indian opposition, NCP, KCR, a lot of the Indian opposition basically is still imbued. They may not call themselves Congress, but they came out of Congress. A lot of them came out of Congress. And they're still imbued with this Nehruvian ideology. And it is this ideology that the BJP basically seems to want to end.